Venus with Galaxy Inc. And today for our writing tip, we're going to be talking about how to begin a story. Usually when I'm on Reddit boards or things like that, when people are asking for writing advice, they'll ask, how do I start a story? And people give some really bad advice. And what they say is, just start writing, which sounds good, but it's not good advice, because you are asking this question of how to start, because you don't know. And if you just start, you don't know where to start or how to begin. So I would like to help you with that today and see if we can, kind of get you thinking about different ways that you can start a story. The first thing is, of course, we need to set up a story so that we care about our characters. So we need to know why we need to care. I wrote a high fantasy story or book about a queen who gets wounded in battle and is taken as a prisoner of war. And I could have started the story as the queen getting wounded in battle and taken as a prisoner of war, but you wouldn't know why you should care or what it was important about this battle or any of the logistics of it or any of the characters. And you could start a story there, but I felt that it was important to kind of back it up a little bit, go back to the night before the battle, and really start explaining in as little detail as possible, because I don't want it to be lots of exposition, who these characters are, why it's important, why this battle particularly is important, and why it matters so much that this queen has been wounded in battle. And that I want you, as the reader, to really care about her and care about this character being hurt. So when you're creating these beginnings, you need to kind of look at your beginning and say, why am I creating a character that people care about? Or, we're going to go to the opposite side, of course, is if you're writing a story about an anti-hero or a bully, or you're starting the story kind of from an unusual place, because most people don't write about those things, you need to set up why we shouldn't care about this person or why this person is so horrible. But we do need a little bit of that setup. So if you've got a character in mind, you need to start looking at the character and going, why do I want the reader to care about them? Or why do I want the reader to not care so much about them? But you need to set it up a little bit. So even if you have an image in your mind of where you want it to start, think about how you're setting it up so that we have a character that people actually want to read about. So the second thing that you need to really be looking at is, what kind of genre are you writing? And that kind of determines the speed at which you're going to set up a story. So if you're writing an adult book, typically adult books have a little bit more time to meander and get going. So a good example of this is the very famous DUNE by Herbert. Huge, thick book, and it takes at least 100 pages for anything to get going in this story, because there's so many characters and there's so much political intrigue and so much is going on that it's okay that we're spending 100 pages getting to know these characters, because we need to know all of this stuff in order for the story to make any sense, right? And we couldn't start the story later. It needs to start at this moment. So the other thing that you can look at, though, is also if you're writing genres that are shorter form. So if you're writing poetry, obviously, you need to get it going right away. If you're writing short stories or children's books. I have a lot of experience with children's books. Children's books need to get going right away. It's not that children are impatient, okay? It's that children stories are shorter. And so you need to get going and get the story going so that the characters are already in the action. The kids are engaged right away. And that's really important. So when you're looking at these writings and these different stories, you can think back to the books that you read as a kid and think about your favorite stories and where did they start and how quickly did it take for them to get going. And that's a really important thing to analyze. The books that you're kind of trying to emulate, how fast did they get going? And then look at your own story and say, how much time do I have? Do I need to start on page 1 or do I need to get going right away? So the third point, and I think probably the most important out of all the ones I'm going to mention today, is that you need to ask yourself, why today? In other words, why is your story starting now? What is important about this day? So a good example of this in talking about the school story is the Absolutely True Diary of a Part-Time Indian. It begins with the main character going to school been there a dozen times. I think he's in 8th grade or something like that. He is on an Indian reservation in Spokane, Washington. And he sits down and he opens his history book and it has his mom's name in it. And this is important because this means that this history book is 20 years old. And it is the straw that breaks the camel's back. And it makes him angry, and he picks up the book and he hurls it across the room. And it is because of this moment that he knows that he needs to go to a school that's off of the reservation, which is a big deal. And so all of that is set up in that first chapter. But that is why we started the story that day. Why Does the Fault in Our Stars by John Green start on that day, even though the main character has been to cancer support group for quite a while? It's because that's the day that she meets Augustus, and Augustus will be her boyfriend, and he's very important to the story. So when you're asking why today, you have to say, why of all the days am I starting this story today? I have read books, I've worked in publishing for years, and I've read stories that kind of don't know why they're beginning that day. And I read one where it was set in it started in a floral shop and they're buying flowers. And although it kind of introduced you to the characters, I could not figure out for the life of me why the story was starting in a flower shop. Like, what was important? And I, as a reader, I'm going through my head going, oh, maybe flowers are important, or maybe in the future she's going to work for a flower shop. Well, I finished the book and I can tell you that the flowers had nothing to do with the story. And the story really should have started on chapter 3. The first 2 chapters needed to be cut out from the story because they just weren't important. What was important was what happened on the day in chapter 3. And so that's what you need to do, is you need to really analyze your story and say, where does my story need to start so that this day is the most important day, and bringing in readers for this day. But the 4th thing that I want to convey, especially for beginning writers, is it's okay if you don't start in the right place. And I know that that sounds crazy, but you totally can start in the wrong place and just back it up. I had a story that I was working on, and the pacing wasn't working for me, so I wrote down every chapter on a little tiny index card, and I lined them up on my table, and then I rearranged them so that they made more sense. The beginning still ended up being the same, but the rest of the story was in completely different order. And I think that that's really important to remember, that it's okay if things are not exactly how you want them, because the advice that I mentioned at the beginning, that's a bad advice, right? Just start writing, is the only way that you're going to write. You have to start writing. So it's okay. I give you permission to start in the wrong place. It's okay to start your story and then realize after you've written it that this is not the right day. Nothing important happened here. I didn't introduce the characters the way I wanted to. I need to back it up and rewrite it. Or it's okay to write a couple of chapters and then realize that your story needs to start on chapter 3. That, I will tell you, is very hard to do because you have to let go of those 2 chapters, even though you really like them and they were really important to you because they probably set up story and character. But remember that this is about the reader, and you want to draw the reader in. And if the story starts on chapter 3, then that's where the story begins. So I give you permission. I want you that as you start writing, and it's your first time writing a book, or maybe it's just your second or third, it's okay to start the story in the wrong place. And it can always be rewritten. Be sure to subscribe. Don't forget to click the bell button so that you get notifications. I post new videos every Friday with great writing tips, whether you're a new writer or you've been writing for years. I've been Venus at Galaxy Inc. I hope your writing is out of this world.